Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul. In this video, we're breaking down X-Files Fight the Future. We're now at the first film in the X-Files universe, and I can't wait to get into the movie. I'm actually surprised at how much this segues from the series and sets things up for what's to come in season 6. We live in a society where I think studios are often scared to connect movies to TV shows because they're worried people might not understand all the intricacies. This is boldly tied to the show though, and having not seen it for 20 years, it was like watching it for the first time. My wife's also been watching the odd episode with me from time to time and was a bit surprised there was actually a movie. And I said this too, but she asked if she should watch this and I said no. And that's not because of how sexy Mulder is. I just don't think you'd understand this if you hadn't watched all the mythology episodes though, and knowing she hasn't watched them, I don't know if she'd care about them either. And to be fair, I was exactly the same before this breakdown series. But the movie itself kicks off with an updated title sequence that feels really cinematic. Even those opening notes make it feel like an event, and we watch the studio's name coming over the top of the black oil. The logo's been updated as well, but I believe they switched back to the old ones for the show before updating it across the board during season 8. But let me know below if I'm wrong on that. From doing my research, there was apparently a legal reason it had to be different to the show's one, but I don't know, I also think it would have been cheap looking having this title sequence open up the movie. And I love the title sequence as well. It was actually on this breakdown that I realised I've broken down over 100 episodes of the series and never skipped the credits once, because they're bangers. Anyway, where we begin is 35,000 BC. Going through what would later become North Texas, we watch two cavemen running across the snowy sheets of ice. Feels very akin to The Thing, and they follow large beast-like footprints in the snow. This then takes them to a dark cave where they're attacked by an alien. Now, according to IMDb trivia, this was a nightmare to film with, as the suit was delivered with eye points for the actor to see out of. But the alien makes quick work of the guys here, and though one of the men is killed, the other manages to fight back and he pierces the creature's skin. The black oil then pours out his body and covers the survivor in the substance. This then infects him, and as far as films go, this is an incredible way to start things off. It really taps into this almost mythological feeling and how humans have encountered these beings from space for millennia. It ties things back to the origins of humanity and just really nicely plays into the hybrid idea and how far the black oil stretches back. In what's a great jump cut, we then see as a boy comes crashing through the roof of the cave. Named Stevie, he finds a human skull and is quickly covered in the black oil that comes out the ground. In what's a terrifying effect, worm-like shapes then appear on his skin before then moving up and covering his eyes. Now, according to the making of, Stevie is named after Chris Carter's childhood friend, who he said used to dig a lot of holes with him as a kid. I did wonder if they'd also do something where they were kind of playing upon finding oil in Texas, but I think they just wanted to get straight to the point. Now, I did notice when starting this film up that there's actually two versions of the movie. As I'm sure you can guess, the first is a theatrical cut, with the second being the extended edition. So when watching it for the first time, I did start to question what had been cut out, and there's actually only one change in the entire thing. The theatrical cut comes in at 117 minutes, whereas the extended cut is 117 minutes and 41 seconds. There's a whole 41 seconds worth of extra footage in the Snyder Cut. Now, we might as well talk about that early, because it's one of the most interesting parts of the movie. It goes down at the hour 22 mark, where we get a conversation between Mulder and the well-manicured men that adds in those extra 41 seconds. He tells Mulder the real reason Fox's father Bill gave Samantha away, which retroactively paints him in a better light. So far, it's just seemed like he was a bit of a shit dad, but slightly better than Fox's real one, who at this point we know is the cigarette smoking man. But they touch upon how Bill gave Samantha away, and this was so she could be made into a human-alien hybrid. This would then help her to survive the virus that the alien colonists were planning to release on Earth. We learn the Syndicate cooperate with the colonists because they'd spare them and make programs to work with the humans. The Syndicate planned to make a vaccine behind their back, which Mulder suspects was to save them from what was coming. The well-manicured man explains that the vaccine idea was a gamble and that there was, of course, still the chance that they wouldn't be able to make it. So Bill had her abducted so she'd be made into a hybrid, as this would guarantee her immunity. He then says that Bill chose hope over selfishness and that he hoped Samantha would be saved. He also hoped that the project would be found out by Mulder and that the Syndicate and hybrids would be stopped from working together. So he put hope in Fox that he'd find her, and this is why he swapped the names around and basically gave up Samantha so she'd also get immunity. The conversation also says that they fought the future, and with this movie being called Fight the Future, it's something that ties this whole thing together.
That you would fight the future.
Now we see the effects of oil in Stevie right from the off and learn early on how much the forces of evil want to cover things up. We get an excellent take where we watch Stevie's friends run from the cave and then pan up, hang for a bit, and then pan back down while firemen rush to rescue him. Captain Miles Cools arrives and then orders his men to inspect the cave. These are Danny, TC, Glenn and Sal, who don't come back from their journey. This is when things turn a bit weird and a helicopter lands with some men in hazmat suits. Directed by Dale from The Walking Dead, he's playing a doctor named Ben Bronski. How do I pronounce this?
It's Braunschweig.
Right. They carry the boy out and bring tankers in along with some mysterious trucks, and then Ben reveals the impossible situation they never planned for is actually happening.
Well, we better come up with a plan.
It's here that we then pick things up 1 week later and meet with Special Agent Darius Machoud. Played by Terry O'Quinn, this guy appeared as a number of different characters throughout the show's history. Nicknamed Mr. 1013, he played Lieutenant Tillman in Aubrey, Peter Watts in Millennium, and later the Shadow Man in Trust No One. Now I did vaguely remember him being in the film, and when I rewatched Aubrey, kinda hoped they were all the same character. However, they're unfortunately not, and we'll find out why in a couple of minutes. But it turns out there has been a bomb threat called into the building. The place has been evacuated and searched, but no explosive devices have been found on the premises. Now this felt very relevant at the time, and you have to remember, this was pre-9/11. So the Oklahoma bombing was still fresh in people's mind, and domestic terrorism was a really hot subject. His mate then tells him the building's been searched, and he's like, "Oh mate, do it again." And he's clearly just wasting time. Going to the edge, he then spots an agent on an opposite building who's revealed to be Scully. Mulder sent her there to check out the building the threat wasn't called at, and bloody hell Mulder, what you like? Always off with your crazy theories. The back and forth between the pair though is very, very good, and you can tell they focused on punching up the writing between them. They get a great walk and talk where she walks along the rooftop talking about how it's just a waste of time, and then boom, Mulder's there behind her. It's that kind of movie dialogue scene stuff. Now, this surprise is coupled with him talking about the element of surprise and how it's possible to predict the unpredictable. They kind of use this scene as some table setting in which she reminds Mulder the X-Files is closed now and their current assignment requires following protocol.
We fail to anticipate the unforeseen or expect the unexpected in a universe of infinite possibilities. We may find ourselves at the mercy of anyone or anything that cannot be programmed, categorized, or easily referenced.
It's a nice way to just reintroduce the pair to the audience, and it foreshadows the surprise they're about to discover. They also set up a nice bit of tension here as Scully pretends the door to the roof is locked and Mulder clearly panics. However, he then realizes that it's open.
I had you.
Oh, you didn't?
Oh, yeah. I had you big time.
You had nothing. Come on, I saw you jiggle the handle.
I saw your face, Mulder. There was a definite moment of panic.
You've never seen me panic. When I panic, I make this face.
That was the face.
You didn't see that face?
I saw that face. You're buying.
Heading to the vending machine, he then passes by a maintenance man who's later revealed to be the Blackhead Man. He's one of the Smoking Man's assassins, and he shoots Mulder later in the movie. He also appeared as the assassin who tried to kill Gibson Price in the season 5 finale, and it's just a nice thing that you pick up on a rewatch. The Blackhead Man is dotted about the film, and he shows up down the line in the episode En Ami. Or En Ami if you're putting on French, but it said En Ami, I think, in the episode. Moving on. Inside, Mulder then goes to buy a drink, and after the vending machine fails to work, he finds an explosive inside of it. The door's locked as well, having just been closed by the Blackhead Man, whose hair is more of a grey, I'd say, but that's how he is in the script. Now, I always used to get this scene mixed up with Die Hard 3, and the beats of it are actually pretty similar. They discover a bomb, call in a team, and then things don't play out exactly as you'd expect. In Die Hard, it's simply filled with syrup, whereas here, it's allowed to explode. But the scene's excellent, and because of all the pranks, Scully just thinks it's a joke.
Nice try, Mulder.
Scully, you know that face I just showed you? I'm making it again.
It's really some top-notch dialogue, and in a scene that's all about surprises, subverting your expectations and fear, and tricks, the whole thing works excellently. It's probably one of the tightest written things I've ever put together, and it's an excellent way to reintroduce the characters. Darius is then told he's been stationed at the wrong building, but the guy doesn't seem surprised. After getting Mulder out, he also remains behind and insists on defusing the bomb himself. He claims he can defuse it, but when everyone clears out the room, he just sits there and watches it tick down. Then leads to a massive explosion. And I did promise you, mate, there'd be explosions in this movie. Whoa! Actually looks like they blew up a whole building there. Jeez. I didn't mean that many explosions, but this was of course a massive thing to film, and they had a 14 camera setup to capture every angle. This in itself looks a lot like the Oklahoma bombing building as well, which happened just 3 years prior. So again, very of the time. Obviously, Mulder knows something is up though, but he also can't really put his finger on it.
Next time you're buying.
We then jump to the FBI headquarters for a professional review. Mulder, ever trying to impress, shows up late, and they say that 5 died in the explosion, including Michaud. Along with that is 3 firemen and a young boy, which pay attention to that number there, 3 firemen. I mentioned more before. But this is the real thrust of the plot, and Michaud let the bomb go off to cover their deaths. They were the people from the site at the start, and it's all a way to hide the truth. Things seem a bit sus when no group or individuals taking responsibility for the bombing, and the blame's also being assigned to the FBI.
If they want somebody to blame, they can blame me. Agent Scully doesn't deserve this.
She's in there right now saying the same thing about you.
Now, I didn't actually know this, but apparently it's protocol to not leave one person with the device. Scully also claims she ordered Mulder out though, but had the two been there, they could have gone through the correct procedure. Learning they've been split up and reassigned, Mulder's suspicious that they're doing this specifically to him. Scully also says that after all she's seen and done, that if she's reassigned to some boring desk job, she's just gonna leave the bureau. Mulder then goes to his meeting, and we can assume it didn't go well as we cut to the guy getting off his face at a bar. This is Casey's Bar and Grill, which is also in the movies The Deep End of the Ocean and Good Night and Good Luck. This apparently is something that Mulder always visits, they say, but they did admit that he hadn't ever been there in the show before, and they just dropped this in for the movie, and I don't think he goes there again. But Mulder then notices someone watching him who disappears after he shits on the world, the FBI, and the big cover-up with the aliens. So the bartender cuts him off, and he then goes to the toilet. There's an out of order sign on it, and I did wonder if the old geezer had put it on there to get him to go outside.
That official FBI business?
Now, you might notice that he's pissing on an Independence Day poster, which actually caused a wee bit of controversy behind the scenes. Going Irish myself there. But this goes back to Independence Day, which had a reference to the show.
Yeah, I love X-Files too. I hope you get to see it.
However, Chris Carter didn't really like the movie at all, and threw in this moment of Fox peeing on the poster to show his disdain for it. Roland Emmerich, who directed it, then later said he didn't really mind if people made fun of his work, but did think this was a bit of a step too far. But who comes out to meet him is Dr. Alvin Kurtzweil, who claims to have been a friend of Fox's dad. Played by Martin Landau, he appeared in North by Northwest, and the crop chase scene later on was supposed to reference that movie, which we have a poster of up there. And I'm also wearing a replica suit from that film, specifically for this breakdown. What's up with the accents? He then says he's been following Mulder's work and explains that the building was blown up to destroy the evidence. He also mentions this as well.
Back at the Department of State, we were what you might call fellow travelers.
Now this definitely felt like a nod to the episode Travelers, which dealt with Bill Mulder's time in law enforcement. But Mulder doesn't initially buy that they blow up a whole building just to cover up the firemen and kid's death, but he goes to Scully to get her to help perform an autopsy. We then travel back to North Texas to see a site's been set up around the hole. The cigarette smoking man has arrived to supervise, and he sparks one up under the helicopter. Now apparently they had to buy a specific Zippo lighter for this, as it was one of the only brands where the flame wouldn't be put out by the draft coming from the rotor blades. And I know Zippo's the brand, and they had a specific model they had to use. We then see the workers are filling the tanks with the black oil, and going back to what I said before, if you're keeping count, You might know there's still a firefighter who isn't accounted for. As we learn, he's here at the side and kept in a bubble, and though he's technically still alive, he'll never recover. The black oil specimen is feeding directly off of him, and they've brought the temperature down to freezing to try and slow the process. They're hoping they can use him to test the vaccine, and we see something's gestating inside of him. At the morgue, the agents then find a soldier on guard, and though they manage to talk their way in, it is a bit sus that the army are on the door. Opening up one of the corpses, they discover his body's turning like jelly, and they've clearly filed a false report. So Scully's gonna perform an autopsy while Mulder heads to Kurzweil's apartment, which he finds surrounded by agents. Guy's been accused of being a nonce, and these guys have come in to arrest him. Also, I think the officer here is the guy who owned the wrestling thing in Spider-Man and robbed Spider-Man, which I recognized from voice before seeing his face.
Real nice business he's got, huh? You could have taken that guy apart. Now he's gonna get away with my money.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
But it turns out that Kurzweil is a conspiracy theory book writer, and it appears that they're pushing the narrative he's a sexual deviant to debunk his work. And the X-Files did WikiLeaks before WikiLeaks. Kurzweil then ends up drawing him towards an alley and mentions the real-life hantavirus. This is what the feds say the site in Texas is quarantining, and we see Mulder reading a paper at the end of the film, which reports this as being contained. You might notice that the writer of the report is Howard Dimsdale, which is actually a pretty deep cut. Dimsdale was a writer who was blacklisted during McCarthyism, but he later taught X-Files writers Frank Spotnitz and John Shaban. During his time of being blacklisted, he also wrote under the name Arthur Dales, which is also the name of a character that the Travelers episode centers around. That entry also deals with McCarthyism, so it's just a nice nod to the real-life figure. He then says the black oil's a plague and it can wipe out humanity. Turns out that while the rest of the world's been busy fighting each other in wars, the Syndicate have been negotiating a planned Armageddon. The plan is to release the virus when everyone's at home during the holidays, and then FEMA will consolidate power and replace the government. Which, okay, moving on, but we cut to Scully to discover an unknown protein in the body. However, before she can really look at it, the soldier arrives with his boss. There is a bit of a tense scene as she hides away while they look for her, and though we don't learn how she got out of this situation, the mystery in general did have me hooked at this point as things were unraveling. Mulder and Scully then fly to Texas, and Bronskweig descends into the cave to inject the vaccine, but he finds out the creatures burst out the fireman's body, which reminded me a lot of a xenomorph. They're also parasitic aliens, and it felt like the movie giving a nod to that franchise. Bronskweig then runs to the ladder to say that the creature's gone, but upon getting halfway up, he notices it in the corner. Now, I would under no circumstances be approaching any of this shit.
So much for little green man.
He plans to inject it with a vaccine though, and it's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him. Now, the creature disappears and then attacks him from the shadows, but the bit from this that always stuck with me is the fact that even though Bronskweig gets to the ladder, they just casually yank it up. They then seal a hole, put earth over the top of it, and he's locked in there with a beast, which is a pretty cold-blooded way to handle their boss. And that's why I love my editors. Anyway, we then jump to what's supposed to be Somerset in England, but it looks more like the X-Mansion to me, that mate. Now, this scene was actually filmed in California, which you can't tell because it's never that sunny in England. But this is where the well-manicured man lives. He's being called to meet with the Syndicate in London, and symbolically, we have a great moment where the kids are playing away gleefully in the garden, and then after the call, one of them breaks their legs. This just fits with the mood change, and we learn some stuff about him later, which is why he's changed sides, and it's just nice he plays in how humanity's going to be in peril. At the meeting, he's then told the virus has evolved and created a new organism. Now, this reneges on the deal a bit and means that the Syndicate has been labouring away under a lie. Humans are nothing but the digestations for the creation of a new race, and it twists the alien hybrid deal they originally had set up. They really play into the duplicity with the group and how both they and the colonists end up working together while also secretly working against the other. They want to hand over one of the bodies to them to show they've discovered it, and this is in the hopes that the colonists will include them in things going forward. All the while, they'll also be working on the vaccine and trying to get the cure ready so they can infect to kill them. Smoking Man also reveals that Mulder's discovered a body after being directed by Kurzweil. They then touch upon killing Kurzweil and potentially Mulder, but worry that it would turn his work into a crusade. So instead, they decide to kidnap Scully, and it's at this point that we cut back to Texas. At the site, there's a brand new playground that's been freshly built, which is pretty messed up considering a kid just died there. Stevie's friends then arrive and say they aren't supposed to talk about what happened, and they've been bribed with some fresh new shiny bikes. Pointing them in the direction that the tanker trucks went, they then hit a fork in the road, but Mulder decides to drive ahead.
5 years together, Scully. How many times have I been wrong? Never. Not driving, anyway.
The pair then drive along into the night, and we get a really great transition shot. As the pair go up the dirt track, we then fade into another, and for a couple of seconds, this creates an X across the screen. Arriving at a dead end, they then see a sign that says some have tried and some have died. There's also a sign that says turn back, no trespassing, which has been smashed up. It feels like a little nod to how far the characters will push to find the truth, and in staying here, they then see the train pass hauling the tanker trucks. Following this, they come to a very big cornfield with two dome-like structures in the middle. Upon entering them, we then get the return of some of the big baddies from the alien plotlines, which are the killer bees.
Oh, no, not the bees! Not the bees! Ah!
Now, the killer bees conspiracy was something that a lot of you might remember was a real thing back when we were younger. Many years ago, back in the day. But what happened with it, Paul? Well, in 1956, geneticist Warwick Kerr tried to breed Epeirian and African honeybees to help with honey production. However, the swarm escaped and caused decades of panic and fear. They then bred with honeybees across Europe and were said to be far more aggressive than the average bee. Initially, Kerr wanted them to be more docile, but it was found that the bees would chase people further than the average swarm. Now, though their venom wasn't any deadlier than the average bee, they tended to attack in larger numbers, which caused a lot of panic. Headlines then ran out across the 70s and 80s, playing it up like some doomsday event, and this was then fictionalized in the 1978 movie Swarm. Though that didn't destroy people going places as much as Jaws had ruined the beach, it did make people wary of bees, which, to be fair, I can totally understand why. But off the back of this, lots of conspiracies were born, including the idea they were a military program that used them as a weapon to kill prey from afar. It was also thought that humans had developed ways to control the Queen and therefore had ways to attack enemies. Something that still gets a storyline from time to time in media, and even Black Mirror has dipped its toe in this idea. Now, for the X-Files, the bees first appeared in the season 4 premiere Herrenbock. They're genetically altered and controlled by the Syndicate, with them being used in one of two ways. The first is for them to spread the virus, and the second is for them to pollinate the corn, which contains the viral alien replica. The agents are then swarmed and have to dash outside, and I always found it funny how much plot armor they have, as both manage to make it out without getting stung. And we've seen how aggressive these bees are in other episodes, but the scene is excellent even if I'm nitpicking, and I love how they hear buzzing in the containers and think it's electricity or something. The shutters then open and they all come flying out and both make a dash for the door. Now, in order to shoot this, they apparently had their collars, cuffs and pants glued to their skin, and this would stop the bees from going in their clothing. According to the wiki, they also used 3,000 bees in the scene, which I have to applaud them for doing, because I sure as shit wouldn't have. If they even did do it, that is. Now, I'm gonna be nitpicky again, but I actually went back to the original trailer and found that at the minute 50 mark, you can see them doing this scene with the bees completely missing. So were the bees really there? I don't know, but I did catch you guys, you lying son of a bitch.
You son of a bitch.
Unfortunately though, one snuck under Scully's collar, which comes back around in just a bit. Spotting lights in the field, they're then chased by some black helicopters, and they end up hiding in the field until they go. According to Anderson, this was her least favourite scene to film because she was running behind Duchovny and kept getting smacked in the face with leaves as she followed behind him. Now, I have also seen lots of TV shows where helicopters chase people, and I know they've got them infrared cameras that mean you're not getting away if they manage to get eyes on you. But look, it's a movie about aliens. I will let it slide. Eventually, the helicopters give up and leave, and the pair then drive back to Washington. Scully finally manages to make it to her meeting, and after being told she's been transferred to Utah, she gives Skinner a letter of resignation. Meanwhile, Mulder meets back up with Kurzweil, who talks about the theory around the bees. But he also says he doesn't know things, and even though Mulder's like, you said you had answers, he's like, yeah mate, some answers, not all of them. Because of this, Mulder suspects that he's just been using him to make stories for his books, and that he might not even have known his father. So the pair end up arguing in an alleyway. Kurzweil then leaves, and Mulder spots what I think is the black-haired man watching them, and he returns to his apartment. Breaking out an old photo book, he then confirms Kurzweil did know his dad, and this is when Scully arrives. She delivers the bad news she's quitting, but Mulder says he needs her for the X-Files, but she says she was brought on to mess with his work and has actually held him back with her crazy need for stuff to be logical. We don't need it to be rational, Scully. Shut the hell up with that shit. Mulder says she can tell herself that to clear her conscience, but that she actually saved him.
You kept me honest. You made me a whole person. I owe you everything. Scully, and you owe me nothing.
It's enough to unthaw the coldest man's heart, and after a kiss on the forehead, the pair almost kiss for real. However, there is a sting in the tail as the bee comes forth and finally gets Scully. I love the fake out here though, and the way the music soars is excellent.
Ow!
Now, they did originally contemplate having the pair kiss and even shot a version of the scene where that played out. However, they didn't want to pull the trigger on that just yet. They also shot a kiss scene for the episode Memento Mori when Scully discovered she had cancer. But there they felt they shouldn't kiss just because she has cancer. So it's the second deleted kiss that we get from the agents, and yeah, they just keep teasing this thing out, you son of a bitch. Going into shock, she then passes out and an ambulance arrives. Mulder tries to tell them about the virus, but it falls on deaf ears. He then goes to the driver and recognizes the black-haired man. He then shoots him in the head, and it echoes how Deep Throat was killed during season 1. Luckily, the actual ambulance he called out arrives at this point and quickly takes him to the hospital. Scully's then taken in a plane inside a container which looks akin to the one that was carrying the fireman. The cigarette-smoking man then looks on, and Mulder awakens to see the lone gunman standing over him. It's deliberately shot to look like the Wizard of Oz, and Mulder even says,
Cowardly Lion, Scarecrow, Dodo.
Now it turns out the bullet only grazed his brow, but they did find an Africanized honeybee calling back to the real-life conspiracy. Using by his clothes, Mulder then sneaks out with a gunman while he's followed by one of the syndicate. Now I love how you can tell this is actually Bruce Harwood from behind, because he turns at one point and you can catch his beard. But nope, this is actually Mulder, it turns out, and Byers is now lying in his place. At this point, we see Kurzweil's killed by the well-manicured man, who then hides his body in his trunk. Mulder goes back to the bar, which is when he's confronted by the well-manicured men outside, and the pair talk it out. I love the way that Mulder literally arrives as they're closing the trunk, and you kind of put 2 and 2 together. But the well-manicured man says he has a cure for Scully, and he basically lays it all out on the table. Now, the vaccine he has here is a carryover from the episode The Red and the Black, where it was given to him by Krychek. He's also a character whose motivations I've always kind of questioned, because one episode he's working to help the agents, and the next moment he's killing Kurzweil for helping Mulder. But I have done as much reading as I could be bothered to, and have managed to find at least some explanations for what's going on here. Now, the well-manicured man was ordered by the syndicate to kill Kurzweil, so this is why I did it here. However, he then used this as an opportunity to help Mulder because he's actually disillusioned with the group. Though he was part of the initial conspiracy, he ultimately wanted to save humanity because of his family. So the kids falling over before did make sense, and he showed up late to the meeting because he was helping out them, and his interest was more in them than the syndicate. It makes sense, it's a character arc. He realized his peers were willing to be enslaved in order to survive and didn't want to have to deal with alien rule. So he killed Kurzweil to cover up the leak for them while working with Mulder to hide his true motivations. He was sick of how cruel they'd become and wanted to make a vaccine to save humanity. Again, the extended cut has a lot more about what's going on, and we learn that the virus was actually the original inhabitant of the planet. A virus is an entity that infects and colonizes a host and then spreads to other hosts, conquering all. It arrived here millions of years ago with a ship in Antarctica before man first walked the earth. The Greys then turned themselves into a virus, and this is why it was held in a cave until it was discovered. The plan was to have the other Greys come to Earth, take this virus, place it in humans so they could transform back into their standard form, and then go out and take over the world. I think, and that's what I gained from all my reading, but they don't fully explain it outright, and I think the mythology might be all over the place.
Until Dallas, we believed the virus would simply control us, that mass infection would make us a slave race. Imagine our surprise when they began to gestate. My group has been working cooperatively with the alien colonists, facilitating programs like the one you saw to give us access to the virus, in hope that we might be able secretly to develop a cure.
The well-manicured man, though, again, is doing this for the sake of his own kids and hoping that Mulder will save the world. Pulling into a back alley, he then reveals his second order was to kill Mulder. So he shoots the driver and orders Mulder out of the car before telling him he has 96 hours to save Scully, and he then gives him the coordinates to Antarctica. He then blows his car sky high, and that's our final farewell to the well-manicured man, who I have to say, wasn't that well manicured, I didn't think. Anyway, that takes us to Antarctica with Mulder making his way in a snowplow. This is 48 hours later and time is running out. Coming across a base, it again feels very akin to The Thing. After escaping, a ship rises from the ground and flies away, which kind of reverses the opening of that movie. Makes sense that the aliens would choose to land here as well, as the continent was completely different millions of years ago. It's estimated that about 90 million years back, it was a lush tropical rainforest. Scientists dug deep into the ice and then found a network of plant roots buried in the soil. So it would have been way different to what we know now, and probably a nice place to park up. Around the 90s, there were also gravitational anomalies discovered by NASA, and because of this, people suspected there was something beneath the surface. Crashing through the ice, Mulder then enters the ship and finds rows and rows of humans held inside of tubes. Found this really harrowing, and though The Matrix came out after this, I got the same feeling I did in that film when Neo saw the fields of humans. They're simply grown and formed to be used by a higher power, and it brings to life just how much the aliens want us to further themselves, which is horrifying. There's aliens forming inside of the people here, and clearly a place they hold their hosts to gestate. Mulder then tries to descend and slips down a ramp, leading him to precariously balance over the edge. It's definitely the biggest scene they've done in the franchise thus far, and the added budget really brings the alien ship to life. Had they tried to do something like this on a TV level, I think they really would have struggled, but here, it just allows things to go to that next level. Discovering Scully's clothes, we then see as a cigarette-smoking man comes across Mulder's snowmobile. Mulder eventually finds Scully, and after breaking her out of the tank, he injects her with the vaccine. Not only does this help her, but it also contaminates the entire system of tubes and basically destroys the facility. I love this reveal as well, as they constantly said this vaccine's a weak one, but this shows how much of a weapon it is against the colonists. Mulder and Scully then make a run for it while the syndicate clear out, and the agents almost run into an alien breaking out a tube. All of a sudden, they all start waking up, and it's kind of a nail-biting climb as they try and crawl out the vent while the creatures are coming behind them. And Scully didn't see none of it. Making it to the surface, the ice then starts to crack and the facility falls into the wasteland. We then get an awesome moment as the ground starts to collapse and the falling rubble comes behind them as they run across it. Eventually, they sink into the ground, but they're lifted up by something rising to the surface. We then see the ship finally flying overhead, which dwarfs everything around it. Such a great way to pay things off, and after all the doubt that Mulder went through in season 5, he finally has his fate confirmed. It's kind of like what they eventually did with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, in that only Mulder sees it, but Scully doesn't see anything. But it's still enough for the agent, and it means that we can do at least one more season where she refuses to accept that anything's out of the ordinary. Woo woo! It leaves a massive crater though, and we end with our third OPR meeting with them all struggling to take Scully's report seriously. While this is going on, the Blackhead Man and Syndicate are clearing things up, and the oil tankers have their paint peeled away to show their nature's best corn oil. The cornfield itself is burned up in the process, but there's no hard evidence to validate Scully's testimony. However, she then hands over the bee and says,
I don't believe the FBI currently has an investigative unit qualified to pursue the evidence in hand.
Skinner then gives a little glance over, and we cut to Mulder reading that newspaper that we touched upon earlier. Along with Howard Dimsdale, you might also notice Clarissa McPeck as one of the staff writers, and she was also a staff writer for this in the show. Scully then arrives, and Mulder tells her to go and be a doctor while she still can. She refuses though, and says she can be a doctor here and save lives by working on a cure. It just unites them in a really nice way, and kind of ties in Scully's motivation with the greater plot.
If I quit now, they win.
Now, I always kind of felt that Mulder's motivations were what drove the show, and he's the only one who had a personal stake in things most of the time. After this conversation though, and what Scully's been through with the cancer and Emily, it really added to why she's now as invested as he is. And yeah, it's just nice to actually get them on the same page. We then travel to Forum Tatooine, which I'm sure you've guessed is where they filmed the Tatooine scenes in Star Wars. Here we find the smoking man all the way out in Tunisia at a cornfield, and he meets with Conrad Strughold. Now, I have kind of skipped over him, but he seemed to be leading the syndicate before. However, he doesn't show up in the series before or after this, with this marking his only appearance. The Struckhold mining operation was mentioned earlier in the series though, with this being where Mulder and Scully discovered the rows of filing cabinets on all the vaccinations in the US. Tunisia does get mentioned again in the episode One Son, but the Syndicate are destroyed in that episode, so all this stuff here is kind of dropped, with it being assumed that he was killed during that. Anyway, Struckhold is basically playing off Nazi scientist Hubertus Struckhold. This real-life figure experimented on Jews during the Second World War, but he was granted immunity and a life in the US under Operation Paperclip. We touched upon that in breakdowns, and the episode Paperclip was heavily centered around it, and a lot of the syndicates were members of that operation. According to the wiki, there's also a secret track on the X-Files album where Chris Carter talks about how he took charge of the syndicate in the 90s and that he was the one giving the orders from that point onward. Stated he was a German industrialist who fled to northern Africa, so it does make sense that he'd have roots in Tunisia. The pair then talk about Mulder, and though he's discovered things, his cause is hopeless.
He's but one man. One man alone cannot fight the future.
However, the smoking man then presents a message that he's received, which shows he's no longer just one man. It says, X-Files reopened, stop, please advise, stop. We then pan up to the gigantic cornfield and several of the B-domes, which close out the movie. And that takes us to the end of Fight the Future. Having now seen all the mythology stuff and how it builds to this, I really enjoyed the movie way more than I ever had in the past, because I didn't think it worked that well, and I don't think it will work well if you're not up to date with that stuff. But if you are, I think you're going to find a lot to like here, and it just really ramps things up. That gives them the opportunity as well to do a lot with the budget that wouldn't be possible if you were just making things for TV. Even the schedule of them doing 20 episodes a season and having half a month per episode was high pressure enough, but them taking 10 weeks to shoot this gave them a lot more time to work things and produce what I think is quite a strong film. Still insane to me they managed to make this movie while also making a season of TV, and I don't think the quality dipped at all. So yeah, it concludes a lot of things really nicely, while also laying the groundwork for season 6. I will of course be back for that as well, and I hope to see you over at the breakdown. Please drop a like on this video if you've enjoyed it too, and leave a comment with all your thoughts below. If you want to follow us on Instagram and keep up to date with what we're doing, then make sure that you check us out at Heavy Spoilers. Did you know as well that members of the channel also get early access to videos like this every single week, and if you click the join button you get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else. Costs just 99 cents a month. In August we're donating all that money to charity that's going to the Newcastle Cats and Dog Shelter. I am running a half marathon for them, and we're just going to be taking all those funds, giving it straight to the charity and raising money for a good cause. So don't feel bad about donating, yeah? Now if you want something else to watch, mate, guess what? Breakdown of something else X-Files on screen right now. If not though, huge thank you for sticking through this video. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.